Awesome. Welcome, everyone, to the CS Leadership Roundtable. I'm Andrew Marks, co-founder of Success Hacker and the Success Coaching Training Program. We're back for our monthly live Leadership Roundtable today, talking about best practices for new CS managers. This free learning event is brought to you by Success Coaching, the world leader in customer success professional development training, now with more than 14,000 students globally on our platform. Our training programs are available in a variety of formats, from self-paced online learning to virtual instructor-led boot camps. We're now accepting registrations for our summer 12-week live coaching programs being offered in conjunction with the University of San Francisco School of Management. Our 3-day level 1 and 2 boot camps and all of our standalone courses taught by industry experts, including data-driven decision-making, having difficult conversations, change management for customer success, outcome-based selling, and what successful managers do, which is a customer success theme management training and coaching program. Registration is open for all of those through October. Right now on our website, find out more at successcoaching.co, and Ashley is going to drop a link in the chat if she hasn't done so already. For those of you who haven't participated in one of these events before, this is a live and unscripted discussion where we dig into a single topic relevant to customer success leaders. Regardless of the company that you work for, the scope of your role, or the sizes of the customers your team deals with, we aim to pick topics that are going to be practical and useful to you. The schedule for upcoming leadership roundtable events can be found at successcoaching.co under the events tab. A few housekeeping items before we get started. This webinar is recorded and we'll be posting a replay along with a transcription on our website early next week. Also, we will be taking questions during the second half of the webinar, so please use the Q&A button found at the bottom of your screen to ask or upvote a question. Also, please keep all commentary to the chat window. Now, there's a lot of thought leadership out there, along with a lot of theories about how to deliver customer success. In this series, we focus on practical, real-world advice, best practices, techniques, and shared experiences from those practicing and leading customer success teams on a daily basis. And to do that, we invite 3 panelists to join me for a roundtable discussion. These are people who are great at their craft, and we ask them to share their experiences and their perspectives. So without further ado, I'd like our panelists to introduce themselves to y'all, talk a bit about who they are and what they do. And as usual, in alphabetical order, let's start with Nils.
Thank you so much, Andrew, for the warm intro and welcome. I'm super excited to be with you all here today. My name is Nils Vinya. I'm the founder and CEO of Glide Consulting, which is the oldest standing customer success consulting firm that has existed since early 2015, and the founder and CEO of a company called 30-Day Leadership. I'm also a certified leadership coach and work with leaders. So that's why today's topic is particularly of importance. Now, in 2020, I took all of my leadership experience and coaching one-on-one with clients and executives for the last 10 years, and all my experience prior to that, and I dropped it into this book right here. Andrew, there you go. This is what I got. And it's called 30-Day Leadership Playbook, Your Guide to Becoming the Leader You've Always Wanted to Be. It is a best-selling book on Amazon. I offer free digital copies at the URL you see there right below me, 30dayleadership.com/book. And I just blew Andrew's mind.
You always blow my mind, Nils. You always blow my mind. It's either what you say, it's what you do, or your chutzpah. But I love it. And I'm glad that you're here. It's good to see you again. It's been a while. Thanks for being here, Nils.
Hey, thanks for having me back, man. I'm just honored to get an invite back.
Of course. Could you push that to the side now? I want to.
Yes, I will.
Okay, thanks, Nils. Now on to Sasha.
I'll have to work on my slide in for next time. But hey, everyone, I'm also really excited to be a part of this discussion today. My name is Sasha Wallace. I am the Director of Customer Success for Creator IQ, and I manage and lead our East Coast region. I've been with the company for a little over 2 years, and I've been in customer success for about 9 years. And I'm excited today because I've been through the ranks and probably in the shoes of where a lot of you are today. I'm based in Atlanta, also very soon will be a graduate of Penn State University with my master's in marketing analytics. But overall, very excited to be here today and to talk about something that I'm very passionate about.
Awesome. And congrats on that certificate, Sasha, coming to you. Thank you. And thank you for not popping up a book link on your screen.
Oh, you're welcome. Not yet, at least.
No, that's okay. I'm giving Nils grief because I can and I should. Last but not least, Toby.
Hey, thank you. Toby Lusich. I am co-founder of Return Leverage and the managing partner. My focus, having crisscrossed a lot of industries and a lot of different functional teams, ultimately comes back to this idea of how we navigate change, both as individuals and as organizations. And in working with CS professionals, it's really talking about how do we help others successfully navigate it? How do we coach to it? How do we set others up for success? So today's topic about managers and what does it take and should I, shouldn't I? Those are all part and parcel, big decisions that we face, right? There's always trade-offs. And so those are exciting. I don't have a pop-up. Here's just one of many pages of my unpublished transcript. Anyway, you can email Nils and we'll figure out what we actually know. Awesome. I'm just jealous, Nils. That was awesome.
Yeah. So, awesome. Thanks, Toby. And Toby, by the way, is he's our strategic partner that developed our change management for customer success training and also delivers the virtual instructor-led program as well. But thanks to you all for making time for us today. And now let's get to the topic at hand. If you're able to create and manage an effective CS team, your team members will not only realize their own success, but also help you bring about success for your customers. Managing your first CS team can feel overwhelming, though. While we're trying to establish a clear mission or vision, establish or refine your processes, develop some semblance of overall order amongst your team members in the broader organization, you also need to effectively manage your people and display authority. In some cases, the same people who were previously your peers, motivate your team, manage performance and accountability, all while managing and maintaining your own effectiveness and collaborating effectively with other internal team members, wrangling yet another challenge, managing internal stakeholders and their associated politics. Whoa. Sounds like so much work and really complicated. So how do I even know if I'm ready to become a manager?
Yeah, I can actually grab that. I think, if you've never managed before, it's hard to know if you're 100% ready for it, right? That's anything in life. You never know unless you try. But I think some signals that you can look out for in your day-to-day and what you're doing, your personality even, or, are you empathetic? Do you find yourself gravitating towards more challenges at work? Do you find yourself being the person that people go to for questions? Do you feel like you're ready to care about something outside of just your world, outside of your day-to-day? Are you ready for the responsibility of working with more, maybe in a lot of cases in some organizations, you're working with bigger accounts, enterprise accounts, but also it could interest you to juggle people as well, like dealing with personalities. Do you want to learn about the psychology of people and how to work with other people on a day-to-day? So I think if any of those things are, spark any kind of interest in your mind right now, you could be ready for that. And it's worth a shot to at least discuss it, put yourself up for it, and just really ask to what the lens of a manager looks like from your leader in your organization.
Awesome points, Sasha. Oops, hey, I lost a little bit of something.
No, you're there.
All right. It
looks like your camera.
There we go.
There you go.
I'm back. Okay. Awesome point, Sasha. And building on that, there's always a couple questions that aligned with what Sasha was saying that I think are great to ask. And one of the most important ones, which we will dig into today, I think is, what does career progression mean to you? Number one. And what does career progression mean inside your company? And, we all agree, I believe, you guys correct me if I'm wrong, that, going through a people management direction in your career is not the only way to progress your career. Oftentimes that is the perception, and you need to be aware that that is a perception. And sometimes in some organizations it's true, and sometimes it absolutely is not. I advocate that it should not be the only way to progress your career, to say, oh, I have to become a manager to move up. That should not be the case. If you are, and the reason for that is, in order to be an incredible people leader, you have to be willing to dive into what it means to be a people leader, which we'll get into more of. But from a core psychological standpoint, it's all about shifting your focus from you and your productivity and being in complete control of everything to shifting your focus to someone else and having influence over other people, where you don't have direct control anymore, but you are responsible for the outcomes. And there are a lot of parallels between your work as a customer success professional as well as a leader, because again, it's about influence and not control.
Yeah, I'd like to add just a quick personal anecdote to that too. I will tell you that my previous company I've managed before, and when I came to Creator IQ, they were very different management experiences. So I think to what Nils is saying is that it is very different depending on your organization. So that's why it's good to get clarity on what the expectations are for managers, I think. As well as how do you really feel about what you're doing on a day-to-day, and do you feel like you can help someone else get to your level of success? And do you feel like that's something that you could be, if not passionate about, at least very interested in, and creating that progression? I'm also in alignment with Nils that an individual contributor role is also very valuable to an organization, and management is not your only career path. So just getting clear on where you want to go and what you really want to focus on, I think is really helpful.
Yeah, I love where you guys have taken this initial question, because you're absolutely right. I think wherever our purpose lies is the right place for us. And so if it's being, that individual contributor with strong technical acumen, absolutely lean into that. I will say too, though, thinking back about early days of starting to lead, oftentimes there's these little hints and opportunities for us to test drive leadership. And we can do that through projects, that are running inside of companies. We can do that in simply taking on more accountabilities, for the internal conversations, the generative conversations that move a business forward. And so I've often met folks that feel like it's an all or none. I have to either flip the switch and become a manager, or I can sit over here and do what I do. And I think if there's one thing I hope people take away, if they're entertaining this divide, it's where can you volunteer a little bit to try it on before launching full force into that path. So yeah, good stuff.
So as you're easing into this role, let's talk about kind of the first step sometimes that people take to ease into this role is that player coach role, right? Where you're managing people, but you still have a portfolio of customers. So you're still staying close to what's going on in the business. I personally, I find that there's a lot of positive, lot of benefits to actually easing in that way. Thoughts on that? Best practices? How have you approached that in the past?
Yeah, I mean, I've personally approached this, and again, I feel like I'll have a lot of anecdotes to give because I was very recently here in my career. But the biggest aha moment that I had in management when it came to this is really, I was carrying a lot of responsibility, and I was aware of the impact that my responsibility had on the organization. So I'll probably mention this a few times, but having clarity from the people above you on what you're responsible for. Once I got that, I kind of put together that the analogy I like to use is when you're on an airplane and the mask comes down, you have to put on the mask first before you help other people. Because I knew my responsibilities, I know that I have to take care of what's in front of me first, and then try to delegate, lead by example, have people step up to really meet me in the middle for what their responsibilities are. And as a manager, it's not about just doing the work for other people. It's also not about barking orders at other people. It's really about providing a lot of context, clarity into what the expectations expectations they should have for their role, and as much direction as possible so that you can also do what you need to do while they're productive. There are tons of layers to that I think we'll get through in more detail throughout this conversation. But I think the biggest launching point is you need to also continue to be successful and show that you know how to do that and lead by example, while also helping the people that are on your team. And I'm sure everyone here will agree, management is very challenging. It's one of the most challenging roles in an organization because of this, because you're juggling a lot, but you're also learning a lot on the fly because of it. So yeah, that's what I would say is probably the most important thing to think about when you start.
I like that analogy. I personally have never been on a plane where I've had to put somebody else's mask on.
Thank God.
I've only seen it acted out, thank God. So you think that this, kind of stepping into the player coach role though, was a good transition for you?
Absolutely. I think being in the challenges with that too, or, you're working, you used to be with your peers and now, you're managing your peers in some instances, but that transition I think is helpful when you really get to know the person, how you manage them. But the player coach aspect, by you continuing to learn in real time, you can help your teammates get there too, the people on your team to excel. And a lot of times it's the best way for you to be able to manage conflict issues with your customer base in real time, get really good schooling in what it means to still maintain great customer relationships while also helping, working and navigating through that with your team. I think it helps really just kind of catapult your success personally in the role with the player coach role.
Now, I know that Nils has a differing opinion on that.
I do.
Which is why I tossed that out there, because we want some, it's not all freaking rainbows and unicorns here, folks. We want some conflict.
It was 11 years ago when I went through this transition. I was a CSM. I was responsible for a large book of business, a few $1 million. And I was a peer on Friday and I became a team lead on Monday, and then had my peers who I still sat at the table right next to the same people. All of a sudden, 3 of them now reported to me, and I still maintained a portion, probably half or a third of my book of business, and I offloaded the others. So the interesting use of the word that you said, ease into this transition, Andrew. And I think that's the common perception that, we'll just, keep doing what you're doing, but then we're going to ease you into this leadership role by giving you the leadership responsibilities, but you're still responsible for everything that you're doing on an account by account basis. And in my opinion, from my personal experience, as well as everybody I've coached over the last 10 years, this is one of the most difficult places to be, because it forces you to balance about 8 billion different things. And most importantly, to straddle the line between tactical and strategic. It is not possible for you to operate in both ends of that spectrum beautifully every day. It just will not happen. Some days you're going to be in the weeds dealing with your accounts. Then all of a sudden you're supposed to have a meeting with your team member and have a career conversation. No, it's just not possible. So I think what's most important is, if you are in this position today, Robbie, I saw your note there, totally understand, been there myself, or you are going to be, that you be clear with your leader and leadership about what the trade-offs are that everybody is willing to agree to, because there will be trade-offs. And this is a big part of taking a stand on your own and being clear and saying, if I maintain this set of accounts for me, yes, I get that I have a lot of deep relationships and I can do this, blah, blah, blah. That's great. But if I do that, what it means is that I am not going to be focusing as much time on building the foundation of this team and the processes and the infrastructure that we have to put in place to scale. Now, if that's more important, then I will do that for the organization. However, if given the state that we're in and the pace at which we're going and the growth that we're experiencing, the foundation of CS is far more important than just who's managing these accounts, then I'm going to advocate that I actually shift focus entirely to a leadership position and focus, and then work with my team to distribute the remainder of the accounts. But there's always a trade-off. And I think that's what gets missed sometimes, because we want to take on more responsibility, but we're not willing to let go. And we're not willing to acknowledge what we really drop on the side as a result of trying to do so many things.
I appreciate that perspective. And in an ideal situation, I love the idea of exclusive managers. As I mentioned, across industries, I see a number of executives of companies, 1,000, 2,000, 5,000, that have very tactical hands-on accountabilities because organizations are lean today. And so, I guess a bit of my perspective on it is that being a manager is going to look really different in different companies, right? And so the idea of how you create value, your purpose in that role, is going to indicate whether you find yourself being more of a player or more of a coach. I love Nils' thought about ideally you can jump in with both feet. But in that challenging world, one of those most critical tasks becomes time management, right? Mm-hmm. And so if you're wearing both hats, know that there's a switching cost. And as you shift into more management, you're going to be giving up some of those technical skills that you've worked hard to sharpen, because it is a very different journey and a different focus. So
I think we can all agree that there's definitely some benefits and there's some challenges with the player coach role. We need to be, what comes along with that, and I think Nils calls out some very valid points. What comes along with that is setting expectations, but also setting some boundaries and time boxing it. Right? Yeah, we can do the player coach role, but here are the things that I'm not going to be able to do during that time. And let's figure out, let's time box this and figure out, is this a 3-month transition? Mm-hmm. Is it a 6-month transition? How are we? And just because one of the excuses that I actually used to use all the time was, I've got a great relationship with this customer. I don't want to hand it to somebody else. Too. Right. Mm-hmm. But and that's super important, right? We want to drive expansion. Those relationships are huge. Well, that doesn't necessarily mean that you need to give that customer up, but you can hand it over to somebody for the day-to-day and be able to act as an escalation point or step in when you need to. You can still maintain that relationship, but kind of separate yourself from the day-to-day so that you can focus on the management things that you need to focus on a daily basis.
Agree. That sums it up, right there. That was my initial reaction. I actually said, I'll take on this team lead role and I want to keep this 1 or 2 strategic accounts because one, I really love them. And I'll admit there was some ego involved. Okay. I enjoyed very much.
No.
Amazing. I know.
Wow.
Somebody in customer success had an ego.
No
and they
way. Can you put that book thing up again? You put that book graphic up again?
I don't know what you're talking about, Andrew. Wait, did you mean this one?
Yes, exactly. That one. Right. Yeah.
Listen.
Hey, Blake, trust me. I'm one to talk.
Okay. As a CSM, right? There was nothing greater at the time than being, part of the, group. It wasn't always just me, but when a customer completely renewed and we actually doubled many of our renewals and the ARR just went through the roof and the recognition that we got for the work we did because the relationship we built felt really good. I honestly can say that it was a blast and I love that. And it was hard to give that up initially. Oh, yeah. It was far more important in the long run, but in that immediate transition, I honestly was a little bit, a little sad to give some of that up because I knew I could support my team to help them do the same thing. But ultimately, that was a big, hurdle I had to overcome and accept that, if I go into this team lead position full blast, I'm going to put all of that on the side and I'm going to celebrate those wins through my team, not be the center point that says, wow, Nils and AE or whoever counterpart doubled the renewal of this. And that just made the, ending bit of our quarter kind of thing. So, there's a lot of emotion wrapped up in this. And I think that's an important thing to just take a step back and become aware of. It's not going to be gone. It's not going to be perfect, but just be aware of what it really is that gives you the fuel and gives you the juice. And hopefully it'll provide some insights and tell you whether or not this is the absolute right place for you. And we'll go from there.
Yeah.
I personally, one thing I wanted to address is I think you gave great advice earlier too on just being a great self-advocate for yourself and really looking at your workload. What can you take on? What do you really just not think that you're capable of doing with the expectations that you've been given for the management role or any kind of team lead position? I think that's very important. I think And I'm assuming most CS leaders are well aware of what over-indexing looks like in a portfolio, especially when they're priming someone up for a leadership position. Ideally, you're shedding a ton of your accounts and maybe working with one or two of these enterprise accounts or larger accounts that the relationship building aspect is probably a little bit more of a focal point. So that should be a discussion where your manager, or your director, whoever is probably well aware of this. I'm assuming and hoping before this even comes up. But I do think, again, Toby mentioned this earlier, it really depends on your organization, what your customer base looks like, what it means to be a manager, and actually what the trade-offs are, right? How would your customer base be impacted? Is it better if you don't have clients at all? For me, I really liked working with at least one or two larger accounts because I felt closer to what was happening in the industry, not just even our product, but what other client problems should I be hearing that are probably next gen things that I will probably have to get on a phone call about to mitigate any kind of risks or assess what's happening with health, and then coach my team from there. So I do think there's value in keeping customer relationships as a manager, depending again on the organization. But I found it super helpful, not even from a tactical level, but how can I solve problems better if I have direct access to customers?
Yeah, and that's big. How can I, if I completely separate myself from my customers, am I actually, am I doing that to my own detriment? Right? Having that connection with your customers helps you evolve your success strategy, right? Customer success is not a Ronco oven where you set it and forget it. Man, I haven't used that reference in a long time. It's not though. It's not. It's constantly needs to be evolving. And if you don't have an ops person that's looking at that constantly, and even if you do have an ops person, you still need to have some connection to your customers. We brought in a head of customer success. Angelica O'Reilly runs our customer success organization now, but I still have connections with all my customers, and I'm always, hey, how are we doing?
Well, that's the evolution. Yeah. Evolution is the key word there, right? Yeah. And so I don't think it's a black and white, like you have connection if you manage accounts, and if you don't manage accounts directly, you don't have connection. I don't think it's that clear cut. There has to be an evolution. You still need to be close to your customers, no matter what, even VPs and CCOs. Right. There's one CCO I know right now who's took a 3-day trip to Australia from the United States to sit down with customers and be close and understand what's going on. So this is an individual who has hundreds and hundreds of people in his organization, and he is going to be front and center on the front lines working with customers, not dealing with escalations, but just meeting with customers. So there's an evolution that you need to go through as a people leader in terms of how you are going to maintain that close connectivity, but in a different way. So the principle remains the same. You got to be close. The application of how you do that is going to evolve and change. It's going to come in the form of, different interaction points as opposed to being a primary point of contact.
Right.
One of the biggest items that when you talk about evolution that comes to mind for me is that when we're individual contributors, our goal is to work really well within the business, right? We have something that we offer customers, and we're there to do it exceptionally well. When you shift into management, you now have both working in the business to care for your clients, but now you're also working on the business because you're developing people. You're flying, if you're lucky enough, to Australia or Tahiti or wherever you've managed to put customers. It sounds like a fun trip. Now, it's never quite like that, right? But when you're working on the business, you still need that feedback, but you're going to be listening in a different way. Right? You're looking for themes. You're thinking about the machinations of how we all operate together instead of just what is it that I need to do to deliver. And I think that for a number of first-time managers, that's one of the hardest shifts. You might be very exceptional in your delivery, but there's stepping back. It is kind of softening how you see your contributions. It's not as visible day to day. So it's a big chasm to cross.
Just a reminder, folks, we're gonna start taking questions here in a few minutes. Please post them in the Q&A. So let's talk about the managing piece of this. Managing, and I want to talk both about managing down, managing your team, but also managing up, and potentially even managing, your peers.
Mhm.
So what kind of what best practices do you follow when it comes to managing people all around you, top, bottom, to the side?
I can take this
Yes,
too.
go for it.
um, I would say, and I will try not to make this long-winded, but I think the pandemic, that's when I first started moving into management. It changed how I view this probably forever. Because what was happening in the world was that people needed a stable place to come to every day when there was so much chaos happening outside of work. And that really is how I approach every day, is like, how can I make sure I understand what's happening in the personal lives of the people that I work with just enough so that when we show up, that they can show up as their authentic selves. And I think that really gets people to be productive, to want to work harder on the days where it gets tough, because in customer success, there are some things that are just not linear when it comes to your success, and you get some things out of left field that can demotivate you, and you need that extra boost. So as a manager, I really try to focus on the principles of understanding what motivates people, humanizing the job as much as possible, humanizing myself. So what is it like for me as a leader to show up? I'm honest, as honest as possible with my team. I give a ton of context all the time. Another buzzword you'll probably hear a lot. And so
transparency.
Transparency. And I think that helps others show up with just as much honesty into what they're struggling with, what they need to focus on, what they feel like they're doing well. And I say this because in the past, I felt very much like I wasn't being a good manager, was avoiding those things at all costs. It was talking about the numbers. It was saying, just do what I say and you'll figure it out. And if you don't figure it out, we'll have a different conversation. But to really help people, I guess, to wrap this up with a bow, encouraging people to really understand what it means to do the role well, giving them examples of what it looks like, and as much transparency into who I am as a person and me understanding what motivates them. The psychology of it is kind of foundational to how I do things now.
Sounds like a lot of like Nils mentioned before, sounds like a lot of the traits, a lot of the skills that we leverage in the job of customer success, right? Connecting with people, understanding what motivates them, understanding their fears, their, establishing that channel of communication.
Yeah.
I think humanizing things.
CSMs are one of the best, we employ these skills and have to employ these skills 24/7 to be successful in our role. And that's probably why you're in the profession of CS, because you love to support and to serve other people. And, all the pieces that we've discussed so far and the challenges that come with this, I just want to be, abundantly clear that the transition from an individual contributor to a people leader is the single greatest transition or single biggest challenge you will ever face in your professional career, largely because it goes from that shift of focus from you, where you control everything, to now your focus is on somebody else. And if I could sum up the role of a leader in one sentence, it's to do everything possible to make sure that the people that work for you are successful. So it literally puts yourself on the side, and your success is going to be measured based on how successful your team is. Yeah. And so from how I used to approach this when I was in an operator position, and how I teach and coach leaders today, managers, directors, VPs, C-levels, it's all about how do you make this, the rest of your team and these individuals that report to you, whether it's 1 or 10 or 100, how do you make them successful? Because that's ultimately what it's about. And I love Sasha's point that you have to humanize these things, because we are people, number one, first and foremost, and recognize that it's not about you, right? You may have gotten into this position because you were the best CSM and you knocked it out of the park and you crushed all the quotas and all good stuff. However, as soon as you get into that leadership position, it's not about making the rest of the team do exactly what you did, right? It's about understanding how they work, who they are as people. What do they want to do with their career, and supporting their growth. That is where you will find the greatest amount of satisfaction personally and success professionally, as if you have that mindset that it's not about me, it's about them. I also run a top-ranked B2B leadership podcast where I get to interview B2B leaders across all different disciplines, not just CS, and many others. And the number one most common thing people say is how much they did not do this correctly in the early days of their leadership career, and how it took them a long time to transition and to understand that it's not about them and it's about coaching and not having answers for other people. So there's a lot of great inspiration and wisdom, but unfortunately, a lot of it is pretty hard earned. And that's a big part of why I do what I do, why Andrew does what he does, why this whole thing exists, is you can take some very significant shortcuts and cut years off of your development time by putting some of these principles into action.
Well, this was the evolution of success coaching, and Success Hacker was from Todd and I, both had the same mantra, which was exactly what you said. Our job is to give our teams what they need to be successful. It has been my management approach for 2 decades.
Yeah.
And so when we started this company, we had decided we need to figure out the best thing that we could do, and what we were most effective at was coaching people, was teaching people, was helping people achieve what they're trying to achieve, and providing them with the tools and the skills and the guidance necessary in order for them to achieve it. That is the root of everything that we've been building for the last 7 years. It's all based on that very strategy. So, Toby, you sound like you got something to add.
Yes, I do. No, thanks. That what I was thinking about is, even as we were talking about that, a lot of our discussion has been around choosing to step into management. And when you're in an organization that's exploding, and every day you have new customers you didn't have yesterday, or you have new team members coming on, sometimes it's a survival mechanism, right? Management they've got to delegate something because their plate is overflowing. And so when in the spirit of some of those best practices, we don't always get to choose when we lead or not. And the title shift is a little more formal, but I do think that being really transparent about what your needs are as a new manager, if you've led elsewhere, if you've managed, it doesn't have to be just in the workplace. Maybe this is something that you've done in past lives or hobbies, but it's different if you're coming into it fresh. And I think that in the spirit of managing up, getting clear about their expectations and then linking that to what you need can be invaluable. Whether it's a dozen or hundreds of customers you're currently managing, how you let go of those things, but then also start to refill your plate is something that ultimately falls to you as the individual. So seek mentors and set those expectations.
So expectation management, managing up, you mentioned setting expectations. Another thing that we like to talk about in the training is understanding how they're measured and what their motivations are, what their desired outcomes are. Once again, something core to customer success is our skills and tools that we should be using internally. If I need something, if I want something from my peer in sales, or I need to go to my CFO, or I need to think about what are their objectives. If I'm going to my CFO, I need to present my story in a different way than I go to going to my VP of sales, my peer in the VP of sales, my peer in the VP of marketing. But I should understand what motivates them, what their desired outcomes are, what their objectives are, so that I can frame my ask, my question, whatever it is I'm trying to convey with them in the most relatable way possible.
Yeah. I will say, I've carried that over from a CSM into leadership. I ask why to death. And for anyone on the call that may have trouble speaking to the people above them, I would say just hop over that hurdle and ask for what you need, or ask for the time to just talk through it, because that is a huge lesson that I've learned as well, is that I can ask and should be asking questions of my management team, my directors, to really make sure that I'm able to be set up for success, right? That's their job, is to help me get set up for success. So if something is not clear, I always ask why, even if it's uncomfortable.
Andrew, can we touch on the mentors piece? Toby brought it up, and I think it's a really important point. It's often a term that gets thrown around.
Yeah, let's talk about, let's spend a couple minutes on mentors, and then I want to get to some questions.
Okay, deal.
Okay.
All right, so I got a little bit of a rant on this. Just heads up, I'll probably get some hate mail, and that's okay. Right? I think there's a role for a mentor, but it is not the only role, and a lot of times it is a gigantic waste of time. Here's why. In a mentor-mentee relationship, if you as a early manager go out and say, I want to find somebody to mentor me, what you're saying is, just teach me everything you know, and I'll just absorb it. And I don't want to exchange any money. It's just, we'll have a casual conversation once a month or once a quarter. There is no accountability whatsoever. That's where I think it fails. Now, having personal relationships with network, 100% agree with, it's wonderful. However, if it is one of the primary methods of your personal and professional development, my opinion, it is a gigantic waste of time. It is far more valuable for you to seek out individuals who have done what you already want to do, and ideally have a program or some way to engage them in some formal relationship, like trading money, so that you can follow their process, get coaching with them, and make exponentially more progress than you would if you were just hoping to have a casual conversation with your mentor once a quarter. I've been through this personally. Early in my career, I hoped for a mentor to show me the ropes and do all this stuff. I've languished for 10 years almost before I figured out that I had to take complete control and be the CEO of my career. And once I did that, then I found the people who had already achieved what I wanted to achieve. I found out how they did it as a result of engaging in their programs. And then I leapfrogged and went from a CSM to a VP in 2.5 years, right? Solely because of that. I did not wait for someone else, and I did not wait for mentors and things. So it is one of those pieces of advice that comes up frequently, especially in the earlier ranks of leadership, because there isn't a lot of opportunities for coaching and things like that. And that typically falls on the executive ranks. But if at all possible, I'll leave you with the thought that hoping to get a mentor or seeking a mentor is one tiny piece of the equation. It is not your source of leadership development. It is not how you're going to make a tremendous amount of progress in a very short period of time.
I think we have a slightly different view maybe too of what's expected of mentor. I think, it's if you take up a sport and just ask your buddy, to coach you along the way, if you've ever tried to golf, it doesn't work. And getting a golf instructor is invaluable. But the access to having somebody walk with you across the links, play rounds with you, and start to help you see what they see, that's where the mentor is really invaluable. And I think that, being an individual contributor working in the business, you don't necessarily, the politics are still going to be there. As a manager, you need to understand how to influence. And while there's certain things you can learn about that from a third party, and I say this as a consultant, some of the most valuable learnings is going to be getting somebody else to explain their playbook after meetings, a little bit of a post-game review. Why did you present an idea in a certain way? What was your end goal? Who do we have to get engaged and involved in the agenda to advance the needs of your team or of your particular project? And so I think Nils makes a great call out. There's mastery that dedicated resources can provide you in terms of building your career in general. And then there's nuances that are specific to businesses. It's super vulnerable though to go ask somebody to mentor you, and it's legitimate to expect them to say no. We all generally want that same rock star leader to take us under their wing, and there's only so much room under that wing. So a little bit of balancing act, and bear in mind too, that kind of mentorship or insight can be peanut buttered across 2 or 3 people. We all have different areas of excellence.
Yeah, I guess it. My response to Nils is, I guess it depends. I have a mentee happens to be listening to our webcast today, and it's nothing formal, but when she has a question, she emails me every once in a while. We get together and have a conversation when she's at different different crossroads, when she's been at different crossroads, and I've known her for a number of years. She's been at different crossroads of her career. She asks my opinion. I don't know if that's a mentor-mentee relationship or an advisor or whatever you want to call it, There's still value in that.
Oh, agreed.
But yes, but for what you're talking about, Nils, and what Toby's talking about is, if I want to get good at golf, I would love to get good at golf again. So I'm going to go hire an instructor to go out with me onto the, onto the links and okay, how should I set up this shot?
Andrew, that's the difference, right? Yeah. If that mentee of yours if her connection with you is the sole thing she's doing to advance her customer success career, then I would say there's a massively missed opportunity there. And here's the perfect example. You have programs designed for customer success professionals that are structured, that are researched, that are accredited, that are amazing and have incredible testimonials on the back end. It would be far more valuable if part of that professional development was dedicated towards paying people for the expertise they have that you can consume in a structured way to get the end result, as opposed to just the casual, how are you doing? Which I agree, total value there, but that's the exact contrast I'm talking about. Got it.
Awesome. All right, let's get to that. This has been a great conversation, but we're 10 minutes to the top of the hour. Just a reminder, we do go till 15 after because we typically don't have enough time to answer all the questions. So we're going to keep going here. Hopefully you can stick around for some of the Q&A. So Robbie asks, now 6 months in a head of role, I find too much time to spend on client responsibilities, which leaves no time to manage CS strategy and team management with a very small team. How do you suggest I can better manage this balance? Looks like Nils wants to jump in on this one. And you kind of started to we
started a little bit before there, Robbie. Number one, I think take a step back and assess what would you do that would add value, and what additional value would you add if you were no longer managing clients and you were 100% focused on building your team and the strategy for CS and all that. Okay, so take a step back, define that for yourself first, then have an honest conversation with your leader and make a proposal that says, I've been thinking a lot about the way that I'm using my time over the last 6 months has been split between my work with my clients and my team. The risk here is that what I've seen is I haven't been able to spend nearly as much time as I would like on the CS strategy. And my recommendation is that I actually get rid of these accounts, focus on strategy. And here's what I believe the value to be that I could add over the next 6 months. That would be a very powerful conversation and very, very well received. Robbie, that would be my recommendation to you.
But come with specifics.
Yeah, absolutely. That's the recommendation.
That's the key.
Here's exactly what I would do, is how I would do it. This is the value. This is what we would expect in 6 months' time. But come to the table. Nobody's going to do this for you. Nobody will come to you and say, Robbie, I think it's time you stop managing accounts and now you transition to CS strategy. Like, they will not. You have to bring that to them.
You need to own it.
I think that idea of bringing forward not just the problem, but also some approaches to solving it. That's also how you get recognized, and the hard reality is that we hear all day long, don't bring me problems, bring solutions. You've also got to have a game plan for implementing whatever that corrective action is. And so, if what you want to do is raise your visibility, then identify some of those problems and have a plan. And that's how you get noticed. So I love that. I love that advice. Let's
take a quick sidebar in that, because we talked about that on Monday. See, I always coach my teams that don't just bring me problems, bring me solutions. But you got to take it to this. You got to take that to the next level, which is, I want you to think about this situation and come to me not just with this giant steaming pile of problem that you have, but some ideas based off of what you know and what you uncovered, because you can't just bring me those big piles of what and expect me to do something, for me to be the one to figure it out. I want you to come, with some ideas on how to address it. That's not shirking your responsibility as a leader. What that's doing is it's helping your team. It's helping these folks actually put in some of the critical thinking and reasoning that needs to go into solving these problems, so they don't have to always come to you.
Exactly. And I think delegation is such a key skill to learn, and it takes some time to learn, I think, especially as you're making the shift from individual contributor to manager. But it's the biggest way to see your team, again, how they step up to the plate and show that they're ready to take on the responsibilities without you having to tell them. I think There are probably people on this call from my team that probably hate when I say, well, what do you think we should do?
Right.
They might surface on the surface hate it, but they love it on the back end because
it's part of them growing, right? All you're doing is you're helping them.
Exactly. Right? And I think I can attest to seeing that growth when you really take the time to think through issues and problems and put your own spin on it. Because I may think about something that you have not ever thought about and vice versa. So I think that's the best way to do it, is really how do you approach it yourself?
Yeah, different perspectives.
Yeah, and I just want to emphasize what Andrew said, that if you stop at don't bring me problems, bring me solutions, you will fail. If you go the one extra step, is what I mean by solutions is having done the thought exercises around it, considered some options, thought strategically about it, then bring it to me and let's have a discussion, then you succeed. So it's one of those, common phrases that gets thrown around a lot, especially in the early management. Oh, I just, all my people don't bring me problems, bring me solutions. And if you stop there, absolutely 100% will fail.
Can I just make one more quick comment on that?
Sure.
So the phrase thinking strategically about things, I know can be overused. I think when you're coming to your manager or your director, whoever, to have a discussion about a problem you're trying to solve, you should come with as much background of what you're trying to solve for. These are the things that I think we should do. These are the outcomes that I think are going to happen because of this. Really like digging into the who, what, where, and why of the issue.
Yeah.
That also shows that you know how to think through things and anticipate and plan ahead. And I think the more you do that with your team, it gets to be a really good practice in how honestly larger problems are solved within organizations too. So I know thinking strategically can be very broad phrase, but thinking through what's going to happen next, what do you anticipate the outcome to be, is helpful.
All right, and you put, once again, you're helping your team, right? Mm-hmm. You're pushing them, right? This will only benefit them farther down their career. Mm-hmm. So awesome, Robbie. Thanks for the question, Nils. If you can hit done on that, we'll go to the next question. Chris Jones, sounds like a Nils fan, by the way. Seeing some of his chat. On the topic of mentorship, what is the best way to approach or ask someone you may not know very well but have respected professionally to mentor you? Oh, maybe this is Chris's way of asking you, Nils.
Yeah.
So go ahead and
here's my piece. No surprise. Like, I don't mentor people. Surprise, right?
Okay.
I am a coach. I have a program. I have done the hard work of going through exactly what you all have been through. I have come out the other side. I have coached people for the last 10 years. I have incredible deep expertise, specifically in the field of CS and in leadership. And I put that together and I put all that hard work in a way that can be accessible to virtually anybody. That's the way I do this, right? And right now, currently, and I'm speaking from the truth, I have 3 coaches that I'm working with that I pay a significant amount of money to every single month to help me develop different parts of my business and different parts of me personally. I do not look for mentors. I do not look for help. I go out and find people who did what I wanted to do and I pay them, and then I follow their process and I get their results, and then I get held up on high on their testimonials because I got the result they promised if you do the work. So if you really want to go down the mentor path, just acknowledge that it should be a very small piece of your professional development. It is not the source, just like Andrew was talking about with the example of the individual that he mentors. Is a great relationship to have. It's a great network to have. It's cool to answer a question every once in a while. That does not equal incredible progress in a short amount of time. So I can't really answer the other part of the question, which is how to position yourself to be a mentee. My advice is, use it as a networking piece, but focus on the development from finding people and engaging in them so that they can take you through the process in a systematic way.
Okay. Sasha, Toby, anything to add?
Yeah, I having sat in that mentor role in different places and at different times, I will say that the mentees I'm most willing to make time for have demonstrated some real intellectual curiosity.
Yeah.
They're not showing up and saying, pour everything you know into me, I'm an empty vessel, because I have neither the time or interest in dissecting what exactly fits their needs. So showing up with an agenda, being specific about how I can help you, That's job one. The second piece, though, is that if you're going to ask for my time, then I also need you to be prepared to follow through with it, even if you don't see the end result right away. And to Nils' point, the reason why these people are going to say, here's one of our star students, here's one of my favorite people to coach, is that you're proving their results, right? You're taking their advice, you're taking their guidance. And what's really hard is when you're asking a mentor to give you time, that's a scarce commodity, right? That's precious. And they're still going to have tasks they have to deliver. They have families, they have other things to do besides just give advice to you. So I think that, thinking about what it is that you're prepared to do with the advice, even if you don't like it, is a really important question to ask. And I think best practices is very much centered on that. What is it?
Oh, sorry. I was going to say, I can tell you I have been straight up ignored on LinkedIn because I didn't have those things handy earlier in my career, where I was like, I'm just going to find the CMO or director of so-and-so and just ask for coffee. But I didn't plan out what we're going to talk about. Why am I asking for their time? I just got ignored. So until I made that switch, I didn't have the productivity. And that was, years later, to be frank. So I think this is great advice for anyone that's interested in doing that.
Awesome. Chris, thanks for the question. Kathy asks, and it looks like Sasha wants to jump in on this. Kathy asks, as a new manager, how do you cultivate an environment with a feedback loop that your team can provide manager feedback and vice versa while still being seen as the leader given you are new to the role?
I think this is great. And there's two prongs to how I want to answer this, but within your own managerial ecosystem, the people that you're directly reporting to, I think, again, being authentic in your transparency and why the feedback is important is helpful. And kind of on the similar vein of the mentor thing, like, do you know how you're planning to use that feedback? How are you going to implement it when you hear it? And I think giving feedback is also a huge skill that you could probably do a whole other webinar on. But my biggest phrase is message sent is not necessarily message received. So knowing how to give feedback and how to receive it is something that you need to be very comfortable doing, or at least from your directors as well, have that coaching. I think that's very important. The second prong to that question answer to that question, I think, is depending on your organization, the size, the resources available, I think it's extremely helpful when feedback is just baked into the core of the company you work for. That was a shift that at Creator IQ we made fairly recently within the last 12 months, where we've implemented a lot of transparency feedback from the top down, from the CEO all the way down to a person on my team. So that is helpful. And that's something that came across because we pushed feedback up of, hey, I think people really want to be able to capitalize on our mission of being transparent and providing a lot of visibility throughout the organization. So hopefully that answered that question, Kath, my very good friend.
Awesome.
I think it's really important and a soft skill that is worth perfecting.
Anything to add, Toby, Nils?
I totally agree with Sasha. Feedback given or the message given is not necessarily the message received, and that's where an awful lot of confusion can happen. So one, being aware of that, and two, having the courage to ask. It's as simple as that from a starting point. And a really, really simple way to do that is the very 3-point formula: stop, start, continue. And you can ask this in the context of one-on-ones, team meetings, monthly stuff. And you can just ask your team members, hey, this month in our CS, meetings this week or this month, whatever it is, what should we stop? What should we start? What should we continue? That's it. Like, again, if you provide a little bit of structure, if you give me your feedback on the meeting, it's like, it's a little too open. It's a little too broad. But if you ask very specifically, what should we stop? What should we start? What should we continue? Then you can get very specific feedback across those things, assuming you're tying it to a specific event, like your weekly team meeting, or perhaps a monthly review that you do, or whatever it is. So should we stop, start, and continue? Just ask the question.
I love that. I think that there is a nuance between managing and leading. And much like feedback, it merits a different conversation. But fundamentally, if feedback is about managing, about ensuring consistent execution of your scope of work, then be thinking about how your requests or how your guidance should show up in the work. You know, if the job is done and it's done in the way that you had hoped to see it done, that's a positive sign. If it's not getting accomplished, if your directives aren't showing up in the work, then that's a powerful indicator. You know, people aren't telling you, but they're absolutely showing you that they've either not heard or they disagree. So another way to monitor that exchange.
Totally. We did a huge workshop on this in our CS team recently, actually. And I think it also helps with how you manage your clients, but feedback is a whole conversation that I think is worth investing in as a manager.
Oh yeah, for sure. And it's not just the feedback, it's doing something with it.
Yeah.
Right. It's the same thing with our customers. If we want our customers to continue to provide us feedback, we need to do something with the feedback that we receive. Right? Don't do it because you're trying to check off a box. Oh, well, we got a feedback program for our employees. Okay, that's great. But if we're not closing the loop, it's a waste.
Totally.
Awesome, Kathy. Thanks for the question. If you could, Sasha, if you could hit done on that. Corey, who had to leave, but I want to answer Corey's questions and let her know that we answered them. Corey asks, what's the ideal amount of direct reports for one manager leader if the manager doesn't have any clients they manage? And what about multiple roles, CSM, onboarding, et cetera? Back when I was an operational executive, it was like, 6 was ideal, because you figure you spend 10% of your time for each of your direct reports, and then the rest of the time to do your job. Somewhere around there. I don't know if you all have a different opinion or you've heard something differently, but back in, 10 years ago, 7 to 10 years ago, it was like in that 5 to 6 range was ideal.
I'd agree. 5 to 6 is certainly ideal. 8 is about the max. 10, things will start falling off the rails. And anything north of that, you're just going to run around like a chicken with your head cut off. So again, like there are going to be certain times in your leadership career, whether it's at your current role or future role, when things happen in your organization, whether it's a reorg, whether it's a layoff, whether it's a structural, strategy change, things are going to happen, and you're going to have to go through intense periods where that ratio is not going to be perfect. But the key is, back to the very first point we talked about, is to take a step back and acknowledge what are you going to not do if you take on 13 direct reports, because there will be a lot that will be on that list, and you need to be clear with your leadership so that you do not drive yourself crazy on Friday, Saturday, Sunday night trying to catch up on everything you couldn't do during the week because you were working with your team. And you got to keep your own mental health and your own just state of mind clear, and be upfront that, hey, I will take on these 13 direct reports. We have a plan over the next 3 months that we're going to get this down and hire a team lead and all that good stuff. But during this interim time, this is what I'm putting on the back burner. I just want you to be completely aware. I want to make sure we're in agreement. And as long as you're upfront about that, everybody's usually okay. And if they're not, then maybe there's another solution that you can try.
Yeah.
I think that a number of management roles have historically been designed to be about authorization and oversight, or people following the rules versus developmental. And in a purely approve my time off kind of world, then the span of control can be markedly larger.
Right.
If that's what managers are expected to do, then I suggest you stay focused on your individual contributor role, if that's your organization.
Well, that's the difference between a manager and a leader, right? If you're a manager, you're just doing transactional stuff. If you're a leader, you're growing your team, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that kind of intensive investment, I think your 10%, rule of thumb, Andrew, holds true to this point. If what you're finding, though, is you have a pretty mature and high performing team, they're going to ask less of you, and it's more just gentle course correction. And so as a new manager, then that tighter span of control makes really good sense. But just be aware that it'll get easier as you go along. And so walking into a situation and as Nils suggested, getting clear about what you're willing to do or not do is invaluable.
But also
Well,
what we talked about earlier, focusing on what can I do to make you successful? This isn't about me. This is about you. What can I do to make you successful? Because if I give you the tools that you need to be successful and you're successful, that makes them, then I'm doing my job, right? It makes my job a lot easier. Sasha, what do you have to add?
I was just going to add the nuance of depending on if this is your organization, sometimes it's just not your responsibility to take on. I think new managers tend to also try to overperform and take on more tasks that are necessary to actually make their team successful. So if there are teams that are dependent, or your team is dependent on, that aren't doing certain things, or you need to get more buy-in from another person in order to actually feel like you can do your job, then that's a conversation you also need to have with your director, sprinkled in with the things that Nils mentioned, which is, I'm not doing this because it's not a part of what I'm doing on a day-to-day, and I don't want to assume those roles. And that's when it's up to your leadership to really make decisions on what needs to happen in order for you to be successful. So
Right.
I just wanted to put that in there too.
Oh, that's good. That's good, Ed. That's good, Ed. Awesome. Can you hit, oh, wait. Oh yeah, don't hit done. We're going to ask Corey's next question, which is when thinking about how to understand the individuals and motivations of them to coach for results, do you find that there are most common activities for CSMs like calls, emails, trainings, QBRs, etc., to track for performance? And how do you do this well without making it feel like micromanagement? So I've been in situations where somebody has said, okay, we expect our CSMs to make X number of calls per week. And that just feels very sales SDR transactional type of thing. But I do also understand that we want to make sure that we're getting our business reviews done, and we're getting our calls, the calls that need to get done taken care of. So what do you do to manage that?
I think getting, again, very clear on what are the fundamental foundational CS things that need to happen in the role that you are managing against, that you understand what good looks like for that role, and you're coaching, providing resources, getting the person to the next step if they're not already there, or promoting them, giving great news. But I think you need that direction in order to do that. The motivational piece, I think, coming from, again, a lens of understanding and humanizing things, I think it's invaluable to really sit with your team if you can't do this in person, but dedicate time to really just getting a sense of like, why does this person show up to work every day? In my team's case, why do they talk to clients about influencer marketing every day? So that way, again, when the going gets tough, you know how to get them up to the next level and really be successful. I would say that, especially just from a personal anecdote, again, I stepped into a management position fairly recently during the pandemic. I feel like by doing that with my team, I was able to see some really great results from them because they were able to understand the context of why they were showing up to work, and I understood why they were doing it as well, and that this was a safe place for them. When you have your foundational pieces, kind of tying back to like the activity trackers for performance, when you know what you're supposed to be looking for, you can create a ton of ideas there. I think QBRs are pretty foundational to customer success. Depending on the level of the person, would even join some of those calls if you have the bandwidth to do so you can give some real-time coaching, but definitely listening in as closely as possible. Or if you have someone else helping that person as well, having separate conversations about, are you doing this well? Here's what I've seen, having a week-long look at, I'm not seeing you do your notes, or I'm not seeing the account plans updated, et cetera. Having a clear conversation about what good looks like and you're doing well, or you need to step up and fill in the gaps, I think is really, really helpful. But you need some trust in your team too. You can't be there for everything. Yep. So take a step back and trust that your team is doing their job. And when you have a dashboard or something, I would suggest having a view where you can actually see the fundamental KPIs that indicates the success. And when you're seeing things slide, that's when you can step in and have conversations about, why are we not doing the things that we're supposed to be doing.
And I think you got to look at the leading indicators and the lagging indicators both at the same time. Hey, am I seeing a drop off in renewals and in NPS and upsells because we're not doing enough calls, we're not doing enough KBR? Is there is there a cause and effect relationship here between those two things? And also, I think it depends on where somebody's at in their career growth as well, right? Mm-hmm. The more junior folks are going to require more review, more oversight, more micromanagement, and that's just part of growing your career, right? Versus the folks that are more senior. So we've got. You want to add anything more before I want to ask? I want to get one more question in for Chris before we wrap up here.
Just really quickly though, I love what Sasha said, and earlier she used the word context, and I think that as a manager, it's your job to be translating down to your team the measures that matter for your leadership. Equally, it's important for your team that you're translating up what's working and not working. You can invest a lot of time managing work that produces no value. So think about that contextual role.
Yeah, for sure. All right. Last question from Chris. I'm good at managing up, down, across. At least I think so. I've worked in a number of companies. I work well with my managers and even sometimes my manager's manager. I let my career goals be known. I try to mentor new employees. I take on additional responsibility and lead from the back. However, I'm somehow always overlooked when positions become available. What do you think I could do more of or better to make myself more attractive for leadership? And I know that Nils, you wanted to jump in on this.
Yeah, so there's a lot of context here, Chris, which admittedly I do not know. I don't know if all those opportunities or overlooked times happened within the same organization. If yes, that's true, then it might be time to look for an opportunity someplace else, because clearly, based on just the context that you provided and what you said, you've positioned yourself in that way and made it you're known, had good relationships across the board, and you've even done the work of what the next level up would be, helping new people get up to speed and all those things. So I think sounds like you're doing all the right things. Sometimes there's a fit within the organization, and perhaps your skill set would be better used in another organization. If this is consistent across the board, as in you've been to multiple companies and the same thing has happened, then I would encourage you to take a step back and look honestly at what is the message that you are sending and what is the talk track that you are using, because something is not happening if this is happening at multiple different locations.
Amen.
Awesome. Anything else? Sasha, Toby, are we good?
Nope.
All right.
Like well said.
Advice.
All right. Well, we're at the end of our webinar. I think it went well, but it's not what I think. It's what all of you think. And there goes Nils, right on target. Yeah. So please let us know by posting your feedback on LinkedIn and tagging us. I want to thank my amazing panel of guests for spending the time with us today. Thank you. As well as our prep call earlier in the week. We all very much appreciate you all making time in your schedule to provide these insights and best practices that you shared. One final note, great CS leaders know that they don't have all the answers, but they know where to get all the questions. And that's why we created the CS Leadership Roundtable, to harness the knowledge and experience of the community to help improve everyone. So once again, we hope you got something out of this discussion, and we will see you at our next event. When is our next event? When's our next event, Ashley? I totally jonesed on getting that, totally jonesed on putting that up in this. Our next event is May 11th, when we're going to talk about setting customer success KPIs with Krista Roberts, Patrice Sawchuk, and Kaveh Jofard. Check out successcoaching.co to find out more and sign up. Until we see you again, have a great rest of your day, week, and month. Stay safe and stay healthy, everyone.